Well, hello everybody. Been a long time since I've had a computer and been on the internet, but anyway, today I'd like to speak about mutual obligations. I have no idea what I'm doing with this equipment. I have no idea how to use the software. I hope over time I get better at it. I hope over time I get better in front of this camera, but never mind. Let's get on to mutual obligations. Mutual obligations is basically a sentence imposed on poor people for the crime of being poor and being jobless. It's also a sentence imposed on single parents for the crime of being a single parent. They can wrap that up in any other way they want, but that's exactly what it is. On the other side of the coin, it's also a form of commercialisation of Australia's poor people. The Australian government spends excess of $1 billion on service and mutual obligations. That's money that could be spent. All the people whose main job it is to punish people in poverty and make their lives a misery so that they can never get it mentally together to get out of poverty, could be working for the CES. Now, the other kicker to that is those people that work for the charities that operate and service mutual obligations for the Department of Social Security. That's correct. Everyone thinks it's private corporations. Everybody thinks that these big private corporations are making heaps of money out of mutual obligations, but when you actually break down to the nitty-gritty of it, it's charities that are making the money out of mutual obligations. When you look into who owns the job service providers, job network providers, I'm on a disability support pension, so I'm privileged enough not to have to deal with that. I still get below the Henderson poverty line. Anyway, getting back to the main point of mutual obligations being basically parole for poor people, there is no difference between mutual obligations. Now I'm about to run through what mutual obligations are. You may have mutual obligations if you're a job seeker on youth allowance, job seekers allowance, parenting payment if your youngest child turns 6, and special benefit. Now, what special benefit is, that sounds all very well and good, isn't it? That's somebody who should be on disability support pension, but because of the way Social Security works, they're denied disability support pension so that they don't get payments of the level of disability support pension, so they get less money than they're deserved according to the Social Security Act. And on top of that, we throw mutual obligations on top of them. Most of these people have mental illness along the lines of social anxiety, undiagnosed autism, undiagnosed ADHD, and a lot of them were in care as children. Mutual obligations, if you've been in care of children, just brings back that horrible memory of being in care as a child. Mutual obligations is so much like parole that my friends who the only reason they're career criminals is that they refuse to accept Social Security in any form because they won't do mutual obligations, because they feel like they've already done their parole, they've served their time, and why should they do parole when they haven't committed an offence? And I have to ask myself the same question. Your obligations are the tasks and activities you agree to do to help you find a job. Your obligations may include Your obligations are the tasks and activities you agree to do to help you find a job. What's really funny about that is you don't agree to anything. You have paperwork put in front of you. If you refuse to sign it, you don't get Social Security. Where's this agreement? There's not an agreement. It's signing something under duress. You have no leeway to negotiate with your service provider because of a mental illness, because of DV, because of a drug problem, because you may have a criminal record. I have a friend who doesn't receive Social Security when he's entitled to do it because the ridiculousness of the things they were asking him to do after spending 25 years of his life in prison was so crazy. He's just that's ridiculous and it's stupid. Fortunately for my friend, while he was in prison, he got I think an arts degree and maybe a couple of other university degrees, and that in no way is a statement in support of the way the prison system works. I'm sure I'll have very long things to say about the prison system in this country as we go along and I make more episodes. But like I say, keep on trying to bring myself back to, that's my autism, by the way. I'm here to talk about mutual obligations and what that does to people in poverty and how it's basically a prison sentence. I first of all want to start with, you may have to do mutual obligations if you're on parenting payments after your youngest child turns 6. Since mutual obligations was introduced for people on single parenting payments, and this is a subject that nobody wants to bring up, but if you overlay the increase in infanticide in this country and put it right down beside mutual obligations for single parents, because at the time that was put in, both Labor and Liberal, who both voted for it, and that's also a very, very important thing to remember coming the next election. When it comes to punishing poor people and using Social Security as a tool to keep 1 million people in this country in intergenerational poverty, which raises the youth crime, raises the rate of mental health, raises the amount of disease we have in our poor young children because they don't have proper food. They're permanently stressed out because everything's stressful. Like, you people with money, you people on a living wage who are renting a house and have enough money to buy food and put fuel in your car, and maybe if you're very, very, very lucky, you might be able to take your kids to the pictures. Remember when I asked that one once? Maybe I shouldn't talk about that. You have no idea what it's like. You have no idea. You think all these things sound very, very good from the perspective of somebody who has a job who will never have to deal with Social Security. But what these things mean in reality on the ground is that people who receive Social Security are also doing parole, but they've never been to court. They've never committed an offence. Last time I checked on the Australian, on all of the crime things and that I could look up, I don't see a crime in the books for poverty. I don't see a crime in the books for being a single parent. I don't see a crime in the books for being homeless. And the other thing on that is we don't have to do this to people. We could give everybody who services mutual obligations. We can restart a government department called the CES. We already pay everybody who services mutual obligations. We pay their wages. Where the people go to do mutual obligations, the people servicing those people are not paid by the people that they work for. They are in a roundabout way, but where those people get their money from is the government. So they actually are paid by the government. So why the hell don't we just put them in the CES, make them public servants? And the reason for that is in this capitalist world, we're commoditized. Mutual obligations is how they can commoditize poor people. There's over $1 billion spent on mutual obligations. I think it's $3.5 billion, and that's from 2019. I've been out of the game for a long time, so I'm not really sure what the figures are. Next time I make a video on this, I'll be able to put graphs up and everything, but I don't even know how any of this software works at the moment, and I'll eventually get there, and I'll make another thing on mutual obligations. I have friends who've committed suicide from mutual obligations. The thing I mentioned before about special benefits, and that's how the government, with the help of the Labor Party, the Liberal Party, made it possible, introduced legislation to make it possible to deny people who are deserving of disability support pension the disability support pension, and they introduced special benefit, or whatever they call it. I had a job for 5 years, and since I was 16, whenever I wasn't working, I was on disability support pension. The reason for that is I was raised in care, and being raised in care for me involved every horrible story you've ever heard. So quite frankly, when I was ready for work, I'd go out and find a job. I'm not educated. I left school when I was 13, so my jobs consisted of things like picking fruit, digging holes, driving trucks once I got a truck driving license. I got a job for a company for 5 years, and then, like, back then when I was younger, I had a nervous breakdown, or whatever you want to call it. Overworked by horrible employees eventually got too much for me, and I couldn't do it anymore. So I went to Social Security and I asked for my job. I asked for my disability support pension like I already did. And they told me because I had been working, I'm not entitled to disability support pension anymore. And for 5 years, I lost my disability support pension and had to do mutual obligations. The first time I was cut off Social Security was because I rang up the mutual obligation place and I told them that I can't come in today. I'm feeling extremely suicidal. Back then, that was perfectly normal for me. I've been raped as a child. I'll give you videos about that one day, but not today. Their reaction to that was they cut me off my Social Security. So my reaction to being cut off my Social Security, I really have to show you this. This is why this really upsets me so much. If you look at those marks on my wrist, one of the biggest ones there, they're all faded now, thank God. One of the biggest ones of them is because of mutual obligations. The mental stress that mutual obligations does to somebody that's entitled to disability support pension will make that person commit suicide. Mutual obligations also did the exact same thing to another friend of mine, and he lost his flat. He lost his flat because they took away his disability support pension, put him on special benefit, which is the exact same as the dole, whatever that's called now. I'm an old fart, so I call it the dole. And he could no longer pay his rent, pay his bills, and buy food. So one day he just closed the door of his flat when he was about 8 weeks behind in rent and walked away, and no one's ever seen him anymore. He's never been seen again. None of us know if he's alive or not. All we know is he was heading for the sun, because if you're homeless, why be in cold, rainy Victoria? That's why I live in far north Queensland in the rainforest too. If you can hear all the birds out there and all of the cicadas and everything, I'm well, I can't really say sorry for it. Later episodes I do will be on things like mutual aid and what's it called? Basic income for everybody. Unified basic income. Now, I used to be against basic income, unified UBI, but I had a long court case with the Victorian government, and I got a nice payout on that. And if you want to look into that, just look up Arnold Thomas and Becker. I'm on the brochure. That's how I'm quite proud of that, and I will do episodes about that later. But anyway, I walked away with enough money to buy a house and some furniture and have a car, all things I haven't had ever. Like, I've been off and on homeless since I left home at 13. And even though my payment's below the Henderson poverty line, because I have secure housing, I've been able to, it's taken me 2 years, but I've been able to set up so that I can try and speak about poverty and how politics and poverty intersect, and how Labor and Liberal have the same basic ideas. Now, I know I've gone off tap. This is the very first video I've ever done. I'm getting used to the software. I haven't spoken into a mic since I worked on the showgrounds. Now it's an easy game to play. It's an easy game to win. 1 ball in wins pick of the stand and all that crap. I know how to do that. I did that for 3 years of my life while I was a teenager, getting paid stuff all like a slave. But the other thing about that trippy job is, if I was paid a decent wage, I would have stayed there my entire working life. I did love the lifestyle. You have to come from Housing Commission to understand that one too. I'm going to sign off now. This is the very important take that I want you to take from my ramblings on mutual obligation. I hope to get better and come back to this subject because it's too important not to. All of the horrible things that Social Security do to people who need Social Security, those horrible things that keep us all in poverty, those horrible things that make us so mentally stressed out we can never pick ourselves up out of the gutter, and the payments that are so low, even if we had the mental fortitude to get out of the gutter, we can't get out because the payments we get from our own government are so measly and poor. Our children are getting Victorian diseases of malnutrition. That's disgusting. That's Albo doing that, the child of the single mother raised in Housing Commission, yet he voted along with the Liberal Party when Johnny Howard was in office to persecute poor people because he didn't want working people to get upset with him and he didn't want to lose votes. And what that means is that Labor are just like Liberal, and they'll step over any line of principle for a vote. They don't have any principles. They just have words and point to the past, and they pretend to be a bastion of the poor. Well, if there's such a bastion of the poor, how come they pay everyone below the poverty line while buying billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of submarines? In what world did we come to where the Labor Party argues against the state taking control of our electricity system, and the Liberal Party arguing for it? Right now, I don't believe either one of them is capable of dealing with such an important issue, because one of the problems you get through intergenerational nepotism is absolute incompetence. We no longer have a party in this country and two parties. What we have is the equivalence of royalty. I'm serious about that. These people go to Parliament House, they know nothing of us. But they do know one thing: kicking the poor is very good for votes. And both parties are At least with the Liberals, I know they're going to kick me in the head with a steel cap boot. Right, so we all sit here in Povertyville seeing the Labor putting on a pair of moccasins, and we think, oh, that's good, we're not going to get kicked in the head. But what Labor do is climb up a step ladder and just jump on our bloody head from a great height. And both of them are just as evil as each other. If you go back into Parliament voting records, what you'll find is every single horrible, vile thing that Social Security does to poor people was also voted for by the Labor Party. That's the history of Kevin Rudd. That's the history of Julia Gillard. And that's the history of Albo. Life will be easy under Albanese. It didn't work that well. The sad thing is, we all know it's going to be very rotten under Peter Dutton. I'm going to sign off now and go and have me dinner, and my dog really wants to play and have a walk. I hope I get better at this, because I know all I've done's rambled. And I'm going to stop saying that's really bad. I wish I could leave you on a happy note, but I don't see how mutual obligations is ever going to change. But there's one other important thing I'd like to point out. Out of all of the political parties we have, the only party I have with a big giant banner, and this is another thing to tell you how weird the world's gotten over the last 10 years, is the Greens Party. The Greens Party want to abolish mutual obligations. They don't seem to have a plan for what to do with the over 15, 20, maybe 30,000. I have no idea how many people are employed in servicing mutual obligations, but what I do know is those people could be employed in an empathetic CES because they're already paid for by the government. The government would actually save money because they wouldn't be given CEOs of these companies that are owned by charities. So they wouldn't be given money to charity to kick me off the dole, so that then I can go to that charity and get a food voucher, but I have to give my social security number to the charity so the charity can mark that down so that they can get another voucher from the government for giving me a food voucher. When you start looking into all of that, you can see how we are all commoditised, and the only party in this country I can see who wants to put an end to the commoditisation of Australia's poor people is the Greens. I don't necessarily agree with everything the Greens say. It's very strange that I'm saying if poverty's an important thing to you, the only people worth voting for in this country is the Greens, because they're an environmental party. And I don't necessarily agree with their environmental policies as an environmentalist, but as an anti-poverty advocate, as somebody who lives below the Henderson poverty line, if you're making a big decision in this election, vote Green. Right? Because from what I can see, they're the only people who get it. Maybe because they have a lot of young people, and capitalism is at the point where they're really gobbling into the young middle class, and all those people are in the Greens Party. People should watch the Greens Party because they have the youth of today, and the youth of today will be the leaders of tomorrow. And over the years, their party's only going to grow as those young people get off their asses and vote. That's my sign off at the moment. Just remember that life's not as horrible as the news and everybody on YouTube and that will have you believe. You can only really affect change locally within your own local community. And finally, if you're entitled to redress, shine on your crazy diamonds and remember that just being alive, you've beaten the system. Everybody have a good night.